it lights up the entire world, that we don't need a transcendent heaven that isn't here.
When you fall in love, a kind of unity, that's some sort of giving over or disappearance of oneself into another.
Whenever I have fallen in love, and really been just in that kind of filled up state of bliss, everybody I see seems beautiful.
Today is going to be more like a primer to our entire show, insofar as we're going to discuss why we named the show The Ladder. We're going to go into this more deeply next week. For now, just a quick discussion about a passage in Plato's Symposium and its staying power, and why it is that when we think of ourselves as part of the Platonic tradition, we think of ourselves as part of this path of ascension, whether that be an ascension on a ladder or a cave, out of the cave, so on and so forth. This notion of anabasis, right? Ascent rather than katabasis, descent. That this is just as much part of the Platonic tradition as the going under Orphic aspect of the descent into the cave. So I'm going to start with the passage where this comes from in Plato's Symposium. So Diotima or Diotima, doesn't matter how you pronounce it. I'm not a elitist here. And she's talking to Socrates about this particular movement in the erotic life. So, and this is after a certain amount of training that has already occurred. So, when a man has been thus far tutored in the lure of love, passing from view to view of beautiful things in the right and regular ascent, suddenly he will have revealed to him, as he draws to the close of his dealings in love, a wondrous vision, beautiful in its nature. And this, Socrates, is the final object of all those previous toils. First of all, it is ever existent and neither comes to be nor perishes, neither waxes nor wanes. Next, is not beautiful in part and in part ugly, nor is it such a time and in another at another, nor in one respect beautiful and then in another ugly, nor so affected by position as to seem beautiful to some and ugly to others. Nor, again, will our initiate find the beautiful presented to him in the guise of a face or of hands or any other portion of the body, nor as a particular description or piece of knowledge, nor as existing somewhere in another substance, such as an animal or the earth or the sky or any other thing, but existing ever in singularity of form, independent by itself, while all the multitude of beautiful things partake of it in such wise that through all of them are coming to be and perishing, it grows neither greater nor less, and is affected by nothing. So when a man, by the right method of boy love, ascends from these particulars and begins to descry that beauty, he is almost able to lay hold of the final secret. Such is the right approach or induction to matters of love. Beginning from obvious beauties, he must, for the sake of the highest beauty, be ever climbing aloft, as on the rungs of a ladder, from one to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies. From personal beauty, he proceeds to beautiful observances, from observances to beautiful learning, and from learning at last to that particular study which is concerned with the beautiful itself and that alone, so that in the end he comes to know the very essence of beauty.
Okay, it's great stuff. And I did have a question about how to understand this process going up. And I've always sort of just overlooked it because it didn't seem to be getting in the way of the general understanding. But it begins with falling in love or finding a particular one body to be, if Eros leads us correctly, we should love one body and beget beautiful ideas there. And then realize that the beauty of any one body is brother to the beauty of any other, so that you'd see that beauty in all physical forms is there. So the question I have is that I understand this kind of erotic opening up and you fall in love with one particular body. And then he's just suggesting that you start to fall in love with a whole bunch of bodies, because that almost sounds like you'd become some sort of playboy or something instead of being in love with one. And I don't think that's the intention, but in the effort to say that the form of beauty is present in a lot of different bodies, it makes it seem as if you fall in love with lots of different bodies, which I'm not so sure. I don't think that's literally what's being meant, but that's what it seems to be saying. Let me just read you the little passage that, I mean, it's the succinct expression of it. And this is the Alexander Nehamas translation. This is what it is to go aright, or to be led by another into the mystery of love. One goes always upwards for the sake of beauty, starting out from beautiful things and using them like rising stairs, from one body to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies. That's the conundrum I had. I get it when he moves from bodies to soul, and from soul to different forms of knowledge. But from one body to many different bodies, I've always sort of tripped up on that. Do you think he's not suggesting that you just become like Hugh Hefner, looking at all these beautiful bodies, bring them all in? But that's what it could mean if you didn't read it the Platonic way. How do you read it? Do you understand why I'm puzzled by this?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's about the scope of what the initiation into the erotic life entails, right? When we remember that it is about an ascent and a kind of pedagogical form, right? Where in which, it's not erotic love that is limited to just carnal, sexual relationships, but the kind of love that comes, oh, I see the divine in you, right? So when we, reflect on the Alcibiades one, or the Phaedrus, like that
Right.
is seeing the divine. And then suddenly seeing it in one person, having experienced love for one person, breaks it open where you can see the divine in many bodies, including objects and things, and not just living, the person in front of you. That part of what I believe the ascent is the difficulty of expanding your understanding of where the divine lies in this corporeal, sensible world, so that we go from just this idea of the one to the many. Because I think that's the big Platonic project is not the problem of participation, but the problem of the connection and bond between the one and the many, between the ideal and the sensible. And that what this wrong on ladders is doing is helping us move from particulars to the absolute.
So if you wanted to say something, Gareth, jump right in. But what the key piece that you've just described is that, like, take the Phaedrus, for example. You fall in love with the beloved as if he or she were a god, and you see them as divine, and you worship them as divine. That would be falling in love with one particular body, if you like. But then it also can move to soul. But seeing that same kind of divine beauty in many different people, it seems like a hard shift to make. I mean, I could see it with one, because that's when we call it fall in love with one body and person, soul. But that doesn't necessarily translate for me easily into seeing that falling in love experience to other people. I mean, it could, and in the example of Socrates, it probably did, but it's different from how I normally imagine falling in love with one. And then maybe I'm making it more difficult than it needs to be. Go ahead, Gareth. Yeah.
No, I think you think you're definitely getting at a sort of tricky problem here. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking along something along the lines of what Danny was saying, which is that, in the beloved, in your wife and your partner, when you fall in love, as it were, as you say, there's a number of interesting things that happen, I suppose. One is this sense of a kind of unity there's some sort of giving over or disappearance of oneself into another. So there's a sort of transference of sorts of some kind of substance of oneself into another. But maybe there's also this sense of recognition. And I guess I was thinking about it in the terms of, are we talking about love in the sense of loving others, or recognizing the form of love in others, or something like that? But maybe it's also about things like compassion or charity or other sort of dimensions of love, which aren't purely erotic, or
right.
are driven by that particular impulse. Insofar as through love, one comes to, maybe recognize or understand or have some compassion for others, even if there's someone you don't like, as it were.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah, keep going though.
But this is an image which, so this idea that love is both somehow up there, in this Diotima's image of the Ascent, but is also equally a kind of fount or font of, so it's generative as well. So it's kind of above and below, so to speak. I mean, just to name it in the Christian tradition, the Mary is named as the Fons Amoris in the Stabat Mater hymn, the fount of love, for instance. So wisdom is the fount of love. So it has this generative aspect, I suppose, as well. It's a renewal. So maybe it's a recognition of generation as much as it is of an idea.
No, of course. I mean, Diotima couches her entire discussion within the language of the mysteries, right? And, we tend to think of the mysteries as associated with, going down into the cave versus what happens when we leave the cave, right? When we have to, take that image and translate it into this struggle, right? To, not only love everybody, which is near nigh impossible, right? The difficulty of that, just like crawling out of the cave, is going to be difficult. It's going to be muddy. You're going to get you're going to have confrontations. You're going to be misunderstood. That part of this, movement is creative because you're constantly trying to come up with new ways, as Diotima says of Eros, that Eros is ever living and dying in the same day. That I translate that as to mean every day you're wanting to, ascend in trying to explain or create or do something anew so that you can capture this vision or see the sight of the beloved or the divine in the person in front of you or in the text in front of you or the artwork in front of you, so that you could see past it as an icon, as a window, seeing it as a font, as you said, or a kind of even mirror is another way to be thinking of it. And that part of the getting over the ever dying is the resourcefulness of the creative act of giving birth to the beautiful in the beautiful, as Diotima describes it in the first half of her discussion with Socrates. And so, yeah.
Could I ask a question of the Platonists in the room, as it were, here, in the sense that and this is a kind of continuation of Greg's question here, is that how do we understand bodies in the context of the kind of tripartition of, let's say, body, soul, intellect, and so forth? What does that mean in this particular example of the Symposium to say body?
Well,
is our love misplaced? What does it mean?
Well, then, let me just, I have an answer for that, at least the one I used to tell my students, but before I jump into that, I would have to say that whenever I have fallen in love, and really been just in that kind of filled up state of bliss, everybody I see seems beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I go to the shop, go buy groceries, and the checkout person seems lovely, beautiful. So I begin, maybe in that sense, you begin to see the beauty in all bodies because you've been opened up. And I think it's the opening up that allows you to see the beauty. It's not just in one person, but it permeates the whole world. And then you can go to the other levels of beauty. But in terms of, okay, what's the beauty of soul as opposed to body? I think that's kind of an easy one. It's that we experience it when, you might be attracted to somebody because they're very superficially beautiful, and they got good features and they have a nice voice or something, but they're jerks. And you just find them kind of repulsive in terms of their character. And yet there might be somebody who's a little bit less physically attractive, but has such an incredibly deep and compassionate and humorous and intimate way of communicating that their soul comes through, and you find yourself more attracted to that person because of those intrinsic character qualities. So the beauty of the soul is even more compelling than the beauty of a body. And I think that's how I understand the shift up that ladder on that step. I don't know. What do you think, Danny? Were you onto that too?
Well, so I mean, keep in mind, Diotima starts by saying that Eros is giving birth to the beautiful and the beautiful both in body and in soul, somata, and that this movement of one, then two bodies, and then soul and virtue, like going further. Gregory Vlastos famously said that you kick the ladder once you ascend to soul, right? And I just think that that's wrong. You don't kick the ladder. No, like the ladder is the connecting, binding principle where you can go back and forth, up and down, and that the real Platonic mystery in my mind is that the body is the kind of gateway drug to the soul. Like it's in, and we can never, we never forget that, right? That the body is a manifestation, a visualization of form, of limit, right? Of that which makes things a concrete totity, right? A concrete something. And so that we get our first taste of reality through the body. And what we do when we ascend, I believe, and we get to that beautiful epiphany at the end, the revelation of the beautiful itself, is that the revelation of the beautiful itself ends up allowing us to see it, as I think Gareth might say of William Blake, shimmering in the trees, shimmering, like it lights up the entire world, that we don't need a transcendent heaven that isn't here, but rather what the vision of the beautiful has done has saturated the bottom rung, so to speak, with its light, as perhaps Plato might argue with regards to the analogy of the sun to the good, or the sun in the allegory of the cave.
Well, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? Because this speaks to a very interesting problem or mistake it's easy to make about where the transcendent is. And that there was an image which perhaps we can talk a little bit more about next time. But there's a very beautiful image from a Christian mystic who was the author of the Cloud of Unknowing, and he translated a text which was from the 12th century, called the Scala Paradisi, the Stairway to Paradise. But it's re kind of titled A Ladder of Four Rungs by which we may well climb to heaven. But the image is of, and it's in Old English, so it's very kind of peculiar and reads very peculiarly. So I'll make an attempt. It's, the one end standeth on the ground, and the other end thrilleth the clouds, and showeth to the climber heavenly privities. So this idea that, the one end stands on the ground, the other end thrills the clouds and shows us heavenly visions. So it's like the bond between, immanence and transcendence is the ladder. It's the symbol that holds together immanence, the immanence of the transcendent.
Oh no, that's beautiful.
And I think Vlastos is wrong that you don't get rid of the ladder. That otherwise, why is Socrates hanging out with these people and drinking?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
He's down there at the bottom of the ladder, checking people out and trying to draw somebody else to enter into that ascent, which
he even stays
results
the whole
in a
night long.
circulation. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's there the whole time. And tragedy and comedy, he wants to combine them.
Mhm.
So it's a circular thing. It's not a one way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, even the nature or trajectory of, lines, like every line eventually, if we're thinking within spatial planes, eventually returns to itself, right? And so that's why we can, harmonize a Plato and a Heraclitus, where the way up and the way down are one and the same. That, the value of holding that tension, and again, the language of bond, chains, fonts, saturates, clouds, even the tradition, and thinking about this ascent. So for our viewers, I hope that this was a good primer for
Perfect.
discussion that's going to, hopefully be fruitful in the next few weeks. So thank you for, this taste test, this appetizer for that particular discussion. So until next time.